Good day, everyone. Welcome to the panel at the Big 5G conference on the commotion and cutting through the commotion of network slicing. And we have 5 great speakers today. But before we get started, I'd just like to put a little bit of comment on the state of network slicing. Network slicing, as many of you know, was long touted as the large-scale revenue generator for 5G, and in many cases viewed as the anchor business case. As we all know, it's been a little slow to develop, but I think we're all optimistic that with 5G SA and with some extra things we're going to be talking about today, slicing is finally going to be manageable, cost-effective, and maybe in the next couple of years become dynamic, so that it's actually cheaper to use 5G for a private virtual VPN rather than even SD-WAN. So let me introduce our speakers and ask them to say a little bit about themselves. Let's start with Anand Shah.
Hey, Sue, thanks a lot. My name's Anand Shah. I work for Verizon. I'm a director of technology and product management there. And as most jobs entail in the telco world, a lot of 5G under my belt, but also we concentrate heavily on private networks and network slicing.
Great. And Ray Dolan?
Thanks, Sue. My name's Ray Dolan. I am the CEO at Cohere Technologies. Cohere has developed a suite of X apps that allows the intelligence that currently lives in base stations to be left there or moved to the edge data center. A lot of that bears on what Open RAN is looking for, and it directly relates to being an enabling technology for network slicing. So we're looking forward to the discussion.
Cool. Constantine?
Oh, thank you, Sue. I'm Constantine Polygonopolis. I'm Vice President of 5G and Telco Cloud at Juniper Networks. And I'm responsible for 5G products and solutions. We're focusing at Juniper particularly on the ORAN architecture, the RIC, XApps, RApps, and the end-to-end SMO that stitches everything together to deliver the promise of network slicing.
Great. Franco?
Hey, it's Franco. I'm Franco Messori from Infovista. I'm the Chief Product and Strategic Officer for the company. Infovista is a leader company in what we call the network lifecycle automation. That means driving from the planning to the testing to deployment, everything about the 5G life, including the network slicing.
Thank you. And Troy?
Hi, Troy Saulnier here from Bell Canada. I have the pleasure of supporting a team that does our strategy for what we call our Smart Core, which is the intelligence that helps us manage and monetize our best-in-class fiber and 5G networks. And I'm really looking forward to our dialogue today around network slicing.
Great. So let's start off with our first topic. And I'm going to ask Anand to lead it off. So Anand, how are the operators setting up the foundation for really making network slicing a big part of revenue generation in the future?
Absolutely. And again, I'm super excited to be here and happy to talk about network slicing. It's become a serious buzzword in the telecom world, but hopefully we can dissect the issues and provide you with the insights you need today. So just some background, Sue. I mean, the main thing here is that we have built a network, especially Verizon and other MNOs across the world, that feeds 150 million customers today. And it's a one single network. It's a best effort network. And we're slowly decomposing the network to see if we can build 150 million networks for each user that's out there. Now, of course, this flexibility comes with price. It's going to be hard to properly manage. The flexibility won't be there. So it's going to be of essence to have the right management tools in place to have a network slicing, or to have network slicing in a network this big. So as a company right now, we started in the 4G days, and in the 4G days, we went through the same thing. When we had APNs, we were thinking of 20, 30, 40, 50 APNs and where each APN will lead to in the network. And we were so excited about it. And at the end, we found out that, hey, maybe 5, 10 APNs are good enough. The same thing can happen today in network slicing. We're looking at 3 big slices right now, as you know. EMBB, which has high throughputs, high mobility. We have mission critical as well, which is maybe low data, no mobility. And then URLLC, which is extremely high latency or low latency that you need for mission critical applications as well, and low latency applications. And then we can keep expanding from that. So I think what's very important in network slicing, if I want to name 2 things, are truly understanding the customer needs. That digital technologies are a means to an end, not an end themselves. Okay, so when we talk about that, it's truly understanding the throughputs from a downlink throughput and uplink throughput, the jitter that's required, the latency that's required, and maybe putting them into categories that equate to slices, right? So first, we need to understand what the customer wants rather than getting into the tech hype. And the second thing is ensuring that the right knobs are in place for an MNO. The right knobs means from the device to the RAN to the transport to the core. There are so many elements with so many different vendors that are involved. Having the right pieces and the right knobs in place so we could actually create a slice and sustain that slice throughout the life cycle is going to be very important for the MNOs, Sue.
Excellent point. Troy, do you see things the same way, or does Bell Canada have a slightly different take?
No, I'd have to say we're fairly aligned. Some of the things that we need to really consider is the fact that slicing itself is still in its early days, of course. We've got different levels of maturity depending on the vendor or partner that's bringing the equipment and the software to the network. And the early days, of course, are going to be entirely manual driven. So as we start to deploy slicing, some of the foundational elements that we need to get out there are, okay, obviously, when we launch our 5G SA core, there'll be at least 1 slice. You need 1 for EMBB, and there may be a few others, but the true promise, and I really liked Anand's comment around understanding customer need, because there are customers who have requirements around a lot of devices, low bandwidth, and so that kind of speaks to the MMTC slice that will be coming, right, as it gets ratified in 3GPP and gets released with our vendors. And then there are others who have high bandwidth requirements. So those 3 natural big slice types are great, but then inside those, the sub slices are what becomes really interesting. And there are a lot of customers that, beyond the specific performance requirements for a given slice, are also looking at slicing as a privacy play, as another way, and you mentioned it early on, Sue, as another mechanism beyond SD-WAN to look at replacing the old MPLS kind of network, right? So lots of work is going on to understand, in parallel to the work that we're doing to build all of the orchestration and automation, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But in parallel, we need to really understand the customer need and what use cases are going to leverage that foundational capability of slicing.
Now, let me ask you, Troy, do we have to wait for 5G, or are there some things we can do on slicing with LTE before we get to 5G and with release 15?
That's always the hard question, because of course the value prop that you're trying to generate in the marketplace around 5G also carries weight. And although you may be able to do what I would call slice-like capability, you notice my air quotes, slice-like capability either in 5G NSA or even LTE, I think the use cases are going to be very particular where you want to do that. And as operators, I know typically there's a huge competition to sell the best network, and there's a lot of effort that goes into ensuring that we win the best network claims. I know that in Canada we do that in Verizon. That's their value prop south of the border. And so when you think about that, whether it's 4G or 5G, selling better than best is really challenging.
Yeah. Anand, do you have any extra comments on whether we can do something today with LTE, or whether we can even do something today with 5G?
Again, like Troy said, it's a big debate, right? You have APNs, you have QoSs, you have QCIs. Is there a combination between those two that can get close to slicing? But remember, slicing is much more than that. Slicing is guaranteeing the SLA. Slicing is having the orchestration to determine whether that KPI or that SLA is being delivered, and if it's not, spinning up the right resources and the right compute to make sure that slice is there, which is maybe not always there for QCIs or for APNs. So slicing takes it one step above, but we can get maybe 75% there with what we have today.
So
Yeah.
Franco, you're coming at it from the vendor who actually tries to deliver some of that service assurance. How do you see that?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question, Sue. I think that I'm really following what Troy and Anand are saying, and I 100% agree with them. In my opinion, there are 5 steps that we have to do to reach the real network slicing in terms of automation. Right now, because we have a hybrid situation with 4G, 5G combined together, fundamentally, I really believe that what the operator have to do is exactly what Anand and Troy said. Just select 3, 4 major slices and fit the current traffic there. The second level is fundamental automation. Without automation, without orchestration, we cannot reach the next step. Next step is the automation from the service point of view, the network point of view, looking the service provider. But in reality, there is another automation linked to this that is from the user point of view. The capability of the user to select automatically what they need, what they want. And fundamentally, that is the third step. The fourth step fundamentally has to be in a complete homogeneous type of network. So hybrid has to disappear because otherwise you cannot really expand everything. And the fifth step fundamentally is a full artificial intelligence driven type of network that fundamentally it's probably 6-7 years far from now. But the service assurance story has been always one of the major discussions. SLA is nothing new. It's on the table since 30 years for different type of activity. But this the network slices bring a new challenge that was not part of the past. Fundamentally, has to be something that changed dynamically following the dynamicity of the network and dynamicity of the service. Before, SLA was a static set. The customer signed an agreement with the service provider. That agreement has specific performance figure, quality figure, and you have to verify that these figures are true and are applied and are continuously delivered. But here, this figure can change and can change depending by the day and the hour and the situation and the mobility speed, and there are a lot of parameters. So the SLA assurance system has to really become part of the network itself. Before it was a parallel tools that you can have or you cannot have, but fundamentally was a separate element. In the new vision of the real 5G SA network, the SBA network with the real orchestration, this assurance has to be built in as one of the components of the network, and has to be a sort of referee for everybody, for the customer, for the operator, also because the operator will fundamentally use and leverage other type of network. Think about the public network combined with the private network. So at this point, you need to have something that really take a look to the SLA in a much more holistic way and provide the vision that really fit in each of the expectations that the different participants will have.
So it's getting much more complex, but it needs to still be end-to-end. And one of the other factors that's really changing how we look at end-to-end slicing is the new capabilities for including the RAN as part of the slice and monitoring the RAN. So Ray, maybe you would like to comment on how does the complexity that Open RAN is bringing to network slicing, but also the opportunity?
Yeah, thanks, Sue, and I appreciate the comments from everybody up until now. I would say if I could just chime in on that question you asked, can you do this on LTE? The answer is yes, and we'll show that very soon. We actually have already. Whether the operators want to market it as a 5G capability or not, it's the same radio, so why can't you do the same thing, guys? It's an OFDM waveform. Now, having said that, for Open RAN, I actually think Open RAN removes the complexity if you do it right, as opposed to adds complexity. The vision of opening the RAN in many people's minds is an economic issue of trying to disaggregate the supply chain. It's not an economic issue, it's an innovation and architectural issue, right? So You'll get some better economics too. You'll get cloud economics if you do it right. But the primary thing that we've discovered is that you can move the intelligence to wherever you want. Now think about when you do network slicing, you're trying to match up what a user wants, including what that user's doing right now, and what they've committed to contractually, with the ability to enforce that across a network. And if the user plane functions in the core and the enforcement and resource allocation mechanisms are at the edge, it's a very complicated thing to do. If you move the intelligence and all the resource allocation into XApps and you put it on a RIC closer to the core, you literally have a natural marriage of the slicing elements, which is what the user wants to do with the ability to enforce it across a network. So what we were able to do at Cohere using delay Doppler is to take the resource allocation functions. We announced this with Vodafone recently. Actually, Vodafone announced it. We did it in partnership with Intel and VMware. And they also, what they really didn't focus on slicing, they focused on spectral efficiency, because they doubled the spectral efficiency of their network, which, by the way, is a pretty big thing for most operators. But what you'll see us announcing in the next set of trials that we do is all about network slicing, because I actually think that, as big a deal as it is to double or quadruple the network capacity, slicing is the ultimate monetization engine. It's, if you can take a portion of your network and on a per bit basis sell it for 10x because of the productivity benefits and the guarantees that you can associate with it, that's where the real business models come out. So I actually think Open RAN is the answer to the complexity, Sue. It doesn't add to it, but it does add to it if you leave all of that compute. See, there's a certain set of cloud economics which says bring everything to the core. But unfortunately, in wireless, people are bringing everything to the edge because there's this notion that the edge is so complicated, you need to bring the cloud to the base station. You actually can bring the base station to the cloud. And that's actually what we're doing. And I'm very excited that we're now in partnership with 2 other operators in the US, one in Australia and one in Europe, doing some trials. We should be able to show this within 12 months, possibly within even 6 months.
That's really cool. But I would say the edge is wherever it needs to be, hopefully efficiently and dynamically. Constantine, Juniper's getting into this business from the RIC point of view and adding intelligence. Do you see the opportunity the same way, or is there a lot of complexity to be handled to make it work?
Thank you, Sue. No, I see. I think Ray said it very well. It's really a paradigm shift, right? I think the better question is to look at, what are the new opportunities that ORAN brings to the picture, right? The analogy I like to use is like asking whether the electric motor adds more complexity to the EV, right? It's a paradigm shift. It's a different thing. And ORAN, I agree with Ray, ORAN takes away complexity, shifts the complexity out of the infrastructure. And we have truly intelligent, software-driven now radio infrastructure, right? Can you imagine how simple, how powerful it is to be able to upgrade the capabilities, the features of the radio through a few keystrokes, as opposed to, uplifting entire, boxes and BBUs and radio units, etc. So it's a very powerful new model. And I think eventually it will take some time for us to get it right, but then it will bring huge improvements in TCO for operators, but most importantly, new capabilities that you'll be able to deliver to the customers, to the end customer, right? That is not possible today. The other thing that I want to bring to the attention here regarding complexity is that we keep thinking about ORAN only. That's one big part. There are what I call three major semantic domains in the 5G. The RAN, the transport, and the core. And you have many incarnations of this, right? Even within the RAN, you have transport, you have the mid-haul, you have several islands of transport. You may have the functions of the core distributed across different clouds, etc. So how do you stitch all of that together to deliver the end-to-end SLA? That goes back to what Anand was saying, the importance of the orchestration, automation, visibility, and dynamic control, right? So as part of delivering that capability, we have to start thinking about the concept of multiplexing, right? You've got one physical infrastructure that needs to have the ability to auto-scale onto virtual resources. And on top of that, we need to have to figure out exactly how we manage the concept of multiplexing multiple disparate use cases onto the same physical infrastructure to deliver them to an SLA. You're muted, Sue.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you. That's very interesting. In the interest of time, I think we have to push on to the next topic, but I think it's related in that how does this all fit into the private networking world? So maybe you can take that thought you were just giving, Constantine, and look at how that means what the enterprise is going to do with this kind of slicing capability.
That's the $1 billion or $1 trillion question, right? How the private 5G and the public clouds, the public 5G networks are going to come together, right? And who is going to do what? I believe that we're going to see three buckets in the industry. One is the standalone private 5G and 4G, for that matter. CBRS in the US is really taking off. We're going to see the so-called neutral host, which is a mix of private with in combination with public 5G. And then the big question is how successful operators are going to be to deliver the end-to-end network slicing as a service, whereby an enterprise can really get into a portal, set up their own use case, their own network, dimension it for a number of users, maybe have different slices, multiple slices, and deliver all of that value through the operator. I think that would be, if the operators manage to unlock that, that would be a huge new revenue stream for operators, right? And that's probably the more challenging use case to realize. But if we look at the industry, the private enterprise, we cannot really fit them into one model. There are many verticals that have different requirements, and some of them are aligned more with a private standalone use case. Some of them will have to rely on the operator to provide the capability of network slicing, and the private network as an operator-led service. So I don't think we can fit everything into one model, but most likely the standalone is going to rear its end first, and then we're going to see operators really unlock the complexity of offering end-to-end network slicing, standalone private 5G through network slicing, which I think is the most interesting, the most challenging use case, but the most powerful one.
So Anand, I saw you nodding. Is that how Verizon is going to launch it, or do you see 5G private networking being sort of islands, or do you see a hybrid multi-domain public-private network?
So both. The way I see it is that if you look all the way on the left, right, you have a purpose-built public network that is best effort. As you move to the right, you might get some network slicing capabilities here on the public network. As you move further to the right to get more ownership of those resources, you may have a private network in a sense as a network slice from the public network, right? There might be a private core that's a hosted private core that could be delivered as a network slice to your on-premise solution. And then if you go all the way to the right, we're talking about an on-site private network in where you have all the RAN resources, all the core resources, transport resources dedicated to your enterprise, whether it's a Walmart, a Coke, whatever it is, all those resources dedicated to you. Now, the cool thing about the private network is that it'll be a handful of vendors. It'll be a handful of platforms, not as complex and not as much of a variable as we have in the public network. So what you'll see is 5G standalone come out much earlier on private networks. You'll see network slicing coming out much earlier on private networks and public networks, just because it's easier to deliver a static slice on a box that is delivered by, let's say, one vendor that's out there, right? So you'll see those economics come to fruition because it's a now it's purpose built for the enterprise. You could do a lot of experimentation on that private box itself. So you'll see network slicing, standalone, all those new features come out on private networks quicker.
Cool. So let's turn to how do I actually operate and monitor these kind of networks? Because we've said it can be simpler, but that's by hiding the complexity because there are more choices and more dynamics. So let me ask Franco, from Infovista's perspective, how can operators really monitor, manage, and deliver those capabilities with an easy-to-use user interface to both private networks and their own network operations center?
Yeah, thanks, Sue. That's a great question. Remember that regarding the complexity, the logical step to ensure that the private network works like the owner is expecting are always the same. From the planning time, when you plan the network, regardless it's going to be a dedicated network, a hybrid network as a service from an operator, from the planning time, the time in which you define the services that you want to have over the network, to the time in which you ensure that everything's there end-to-end, the steps are always the same. And the type of tools, fundamentally, and the approach is exactly the same. Of course, the scale is different. Scale is different, and that's what makes the difference. And I agree with Anand that is much more simple at the end of the day, because the scope and the purpose normally is a subset of the scope of the purpose that you have in a public network, of course, because you have a variety of type of customer. Instead, when you talk about enterprise, the set of customer or profile is definitely less. But fundamentally, the approach that we have is always the same. The planning, it's linked to test and define the SLA that you can have within the private or public network, doesn't matter. Of course, it's just a subset of this. Then provide everything about the performances, the inventory and the planning, and fundamentally the assurance of different services. And the fourth one is become predictive in terms of diagnostic, root cause analysis, troubleshooting. These are the four major steps to achieve the final target, that is optimization. And then it's a complete circle. It's a loop that, different than in the past, has to run continuously. It's not just something that you do today and then you do 1 year from now. The optimization, the planning, the insurance is something that you have to do 24/7. And of course, in the private network, that is less critical than fundamentally in a public network where, as I said, the type of profile of the customer are so many, so various that the network has to adapt in a much more dynamic way than the private. But definitely, I really believe, and we really believe that private network will be probably one of the major marketing business for the next 10 years.
So Ray, let me ask you, as you try to link your new technology into all of these automation and operations tools, is that something that 5G makes it easier to integrate than it's been in the past?
Absolutely, Sue. And I think the comments that have been made here are just spot on. The private network opportunity is massive. I think from Franco's point of view, I agree. Anand said it's going to come first. Initially, it's going to come first because it appears easier, but then there'll be a question in this continuum that Anand described, where it's best efforts, public, wide area, highly, individualized but localized in an enterprise. Those are two different supply chains. Question now for the industry is: are the wide area cellular guys going to become enterprise savvy, or are the enterprise guys going to become part of the supply chain for the traditional cellular guys? I will tell you that I'm heavily biased towards the latter. This is the time of massive disruption. The enterprise guys intuitively know, and the cloud guys intuitively know, communications, scale, and IT. The question is, can they crack the last black box, which is the radio access network? And that's what Cohere is helping them do.
I call this the PC revolution for radio, when you can put your own components together and make a good solution. But you may still need a little tuning to make it optimal. So we're getting close to the end of our session, but we have one major topic which I'm going to ask everyone to comment on, but have Troy kick off. So when can we really expect all of this to come together? What's a realistic time frame?
So as we said, thanks very much, Sue. And I have to say the comments in general have been really, really good. What I would say is we talked at the outset of laying the foundation, and that's kind of the stage that we're at now. There's changes that have been mentioned in terms of the radio access network and adding intelligence there. Ultimately, slicing is not just about the RAN, though, as we've mentioned. It's really, you know, UE, RAN, transport, various types of transport out into the core. And some even think about slicing, including the apps that sit on the cloud at the edge of the network, right? And for the experience for the end customer, whether it be consumer or whether it be enterprise, to truly be assured, you need to have some visibility across all those elements. And that, to me, is what slicing is really bringing to the table that's new. We've been doing prioritization in QoS on both wireline and wireline networks for, you know, dozens of years, right? But what's different here is we're looking at the resources in real time and saying, can I assure this new slice that's being requested? And following the life cycle of that slice. So that's why we're saying, starting out of the gate, it's going to be a very low number of slices. It's going to be manual while we learn about it, learning about the interaction and the dependencies between those high-level resources that we need to manage. And also, we'll start plugging in our big data machine learning capability so that we can actually understand the patterns that happen in the network and start to build algorithms for closed loop capability. And so that kind of AI leading into orchestration and automation, I see as really starting to hit mainstream probably very late next year and early in 2023 in terms of operators being able to start to offer more automation in their 5G slicing services. And, you know, I see that, you know, initially it will be putting on new slice types more easily, being able to manage the network more easily, being able to hit the demands that our customers are going to have, and new services, and mapping those service requirements to the slice performances that are going to be given. That is key. And that, I think there's not enough effort being talked about and put into. It's not just about the network, it's about what sits on top of the network. That's what matters at the end of the day, and that's what we need to, you know, start putting our eye towards. And then I start seeing, you know, 2023, 2024, when now we're getting into dynamic slicing, even as was mentioned earlier, multiple slices per large enterprise customer. And it becomes really interesting when you start mixing the private and public network, because I didn't comment on it earlier, but I truly believe that this is going to be the largest swath of this is probably going to be hybrid, where we've got private network resources that need to be on site for survivability and performance reasons. Think control on a factory floor, think medical, you know, surgeries. You can't, there is no room for error in those cases. But customers walking onto those campuses are still going to need to have public network access, right? So understanding that and separating those two accesses via slicing, I think is going to be a really cool use case, and that's going to be what our future looks like.
Cool.
Pass it off to the rest of the panelists.
Yeah, we've only got about 3 minutes left, so I think what I'll do is ask each of you in responding to the time frame for when we'll see network slicing, to also add your own comments about what are the 2 or 3 most important things you want everybody to take away. So Anand, why don't you go next?
Okay, Troy was spot on. When it comes to the management, automation, orchestration of the network, it's going to be tough. There are physical network functions, there are virtual network functions, there are containerized network functions. Some are on ARM-based hardware, some are on x86. We have a slew of vendors from Wind River to Red Hat to VMware that are out there. It's a little bit messy. So having the right knobs in place to orchestrate a slice end to end is going to be a little tough. And that's why maybe Troy is saying end of 2022, early 23, which seems accurate, right? And the other point is that right now it's a push technology, right? We're creating the slice. We're trying to make it fit into some customer need. But if it becomes a pull technology, if there's some value that could be created, if there's a business justification behind it where customers really need the slice, I guarantee you network operators, vendors will work twice as hard to getting this out the door. So that's going to be the science that we have to figure out behind network slicing.
Yeah, Constantine, how do you see it?
Yes, I completely agree with what was said, and I think Troy hit the key notes here. I also believe that it's going to be late 2023 before we see end-to-end slicing in all of its glory, and I believe we'll see dynamic network slicing. I'm a bit more optimistic on that. The takeaway that I want to underscore here is that network slicing is not just about 5G or 4G or 6G. Network slicing is going to affect everything in the networking industry. Okay, it's fundamental new way of doing networking, and we're going to walk before we run in 5G, right? So that's the first takeaway. The other is the ORAN, right? The ORAN is, I call it the operating system of the radio, right? Now it opens new capabilities. We're going to see smart radios, introducing new features in the radio. If we unlock the secret of how we bring that into the end-to-end SLA and ecosystem, I think we're going to see new use cases that will be really disruptive in the industry.
So Franco, we've got about 1 minute, so we need to be terse and brief, but what are your key takeaways?
Yeah, my key takeaway is very similar. I think that 2023 is the year in which we start to see something serious in terms of dynamic fundamental network slicing. As Infovista, we have launched this NLA, the network life cycle automation, that exactly designed from the designing time to the testing, to the monitoring, to the optimization, exactly to be sure that we can provide the monitoring, the capability to ensure that the operator will deliver the network slicing in a dynamic way as the customer they're expecting.
And Ray, you get the last word. You seem to have a vision for how this all comes together, but there are a lot of pieces.
Well, 12 to 18 months sounds right to me. I would focus on Anand's comment. This is more likely to be pulled by the enterprise than pushed by the operators. I don't say that because the operators don't get it. I say it because the money is in the pull. With a large enterprise on the other side, everyone will line up around that, and it will happen almost overnight. Think about how fast the iPhone changed this world from a 3G to a 4G world. A large enterprise use case will pull slicing into this network faster than you can say network slicing. Without it, it's probably years away. Thank you.
Great. With that, I have to bring this wonderful session to a close. Thank you all. It's been a great session, and let's hope we all get together to debate this again in the next few months. Have a great day.
Thanks very much. Let's share a slice in 23.
Yes, yes.